Welcome back. Well, the Central Bank of Nigeria is adopting a flexible foreign exchange rate regime in a policy U-turn designed to boost exports and stave off a recession in Africa's biggest economy. Our CBN governor, who addressed the media after the MPC meeting yesterday, said details of the new rules will be published in a few days. According to him, the central bank would retain a small window for funding critical transactions, and that details of operations of the market will be released at the appropriate time.
The committee, in its assessment of the relevant risk profiles, came to the conclusion that although the balance of risks remain tilted against growth, previous decisions need time to crystallize. Consequently, in a period of stagnation, the policy options are very limited. To avoid complicating the conditions, the committee decided on the least risky option to hold. The foreign exchange market framework now ready, the MPC voted unanimously to adopt a flexible exchange rate policy to restore the automatic adjustment properties of the exchange rate. Consequently, all 9 members voted to hold and introduce flexibility in managing the foreign exchange rate. The bank would, however, retain a small window for funding critical transactions. Details of operations of the market will be released by the central bank at the appropriate time. In summary, MPC voted to retain MPR at 10%, to retain CRR at 22.5%, to retain liquidity ratio at 30%, and also to retain the asymmetric corridor at plus 200 basis points and minus 500 basis points around the NPR.
I was Godwin Emefiele, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Well, aside from adopting a flexible exchange rate policy, the MPC also kept all other parameters unchanged in spite of the temptations to tighten the monetary stance in the face of a spike in inflation to 13.7%. Now, let's make a sense of all these as I'm being joined by the Chief Executive Officer, Economic Associates, Dr. Ayodele Teriba. Thank you very much, Dr. Teriba, for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Now, were you expecting the MPC to take that decision, particularly in the area of the MPR, considering the inflation rate now at 13.7%?
Right. I think that we put more than necessary emphasis on the movement of the consumer price index. I do not think we should place so much emphasis on it.
Why do you say so?
We do not exist for inflation. The economy is more important, than month-to-month movement in inflation. The pressure on social media for the central bank to hike rates just because inflation had moved up in 1 month, which could easily be reversed over the next 2 months, has been too much. It's not all about inflation. The inflation is a very small part of the story, especially in the Nigerian environment where the peak inflation we've seen was in 2010 when we saw 13.7%, okay, 13.9 at a point. And then it all by itself, went down. And we're back to 13 point something now. I do not think the situation we are in now is any worse than we saw in 2010. And it's still going to trend down all by itself. So I think we should pay due attention to real growth of the economy, which is something we haven't paid sufficient attention to. I think that the monetary policy tightening didn't give due consideration to the requirements of real growth. And now that we have an economy that is declining, I think that it's time that the central bank should do more to loosen the stance of monetary policy.
Right. Now, let's look at its decision to loosen its stance at the foreign exchange market. A lot of people have actually welcomed that idea to adopt a flexible exchange rate policy. However, some people still believe that a flexible exchange rate policy could actually trigger the inflation rate further. Do you also share the same concern?
Right. You should keep in mind that you have an economy that is already in decline. And the decline that we've seen in Q1 is likely to be small compared with the decline that might occur in Q2. If you look at the oil production figures that was used for the Q1 GDP growth, it was still 2.2 million barrels a day. In Q2, you have to face the reality that the volume is considerably lower, and that's going to. So you are trying now to avoid a recession. So you elevate the place of real growth over inflation in your consideration, particularly because the inflation that we currently have is cost pushed. It's coming because of high, prices of refined petroleum products. It's coming because of the premium, the foreign exchange market. These are cost push inflation. They are not demand pulled. Therefore, policy cannot do anything about them. They will die of their own self with time, maybe over the next few months. So you can ignore that because it is self-correct and concentrate on how to revive the slowing economy.
All right, let's look at this other decision taken by the committee to introduce another exchange rate segment for what they call critical transactions. Now, that seems to be a concern for many too, because they believe it will be open to abuse.
Yeah, the point is that the central bank has been very reluctant to allow the flexibility of the exchange rate. And now it did seem that they've been forced to face the reality of needing to allow flexibility, particularly given the size of the premium on the parallel market over the official markets. That a premium that large tells you that the official market is overvalued, and it's time to allow for some flexibility. Saying that, and in the same breath, saying that you keep a small little window, tells you that the regime is not convinced to let things go. You should let things go. If you want it to be flexible, let it be flexible for all transactions. So that what's important transaction, what is unimportant transaction, transactions.
Now, this window now would be seen at the interbank market, if I get it right.
You shouldn't guess. Let them come and give us the details of
That's why I wanted you to explain. We have to have the second tier, second tier market.
They should come out. They say at the appropriate time. They are the best judge of what the appropriate time is.
Right.
I am sure we are not going to have to wait for long.
Yeah. Now, of course, they said, talked about the details, giving us the details of the Forex policy. Now, what do you think should actually be considered, by the CBN in coming out with the framework for this new policy regime?
Well, I believe that before the announcement, the central bank, the committee would have worked out the details. I guess there are, considerations about market sensitivity and so on is why, they haven't, put the details out. So rather than begin to, it's better to wait for them to tell us.
No, but in terms of the revisiting, what about the issue of revisiting the those items that were delisted from the foreign exchange list that the manufacturers have actually been complaining about?
Right. Well, there are two effects here. One is the pegging the official rate at, about 200 to US dollar when the open market rate is above 300, to the dollar, has meant in part that people who had Forex had been reluctant to bring them in because the central bank was going to, force them, in the manner of saying, to surrender at 200. Whereas if they required forex, they would have to resort to the open market to buy at more than 300. So that's been a disincentive to supply. And that if there's flexibility in the official rate now, you get a boost in supply. That might mean there will be overall more forex available. Therefore, the gap between the official and the new official and the private market, rates might narrow, and you may have a situation in which demand is almost equal to supply there, and therefore there will be no need for restricting, any particular types of products. So you may expect that the transition to a flexible regime would mean an end to the import restriction list.
All right, now going forward, do you see the stance taken by the central bank now helping Nigeria perhaps avert the impending recession? The GDP growth for the first quarter came out negative, and if we should record another negative growth, that's recession, I believe.
Well, yes, the recession is defined as two consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. Contraction. Yeah, but in the Nigerian situation, you should qualify that, that you have a significant non-oil economy, and you have a small oil economy. Oil, about, let's say, less than 10% of the GDP. Now, contraction of the oil GDP is the direct result of the collapse in the price, and lately, the reduction in our own out quantity that we produce. I think that we should be a bit more worried if you have the non-oil GDP contracting, two consecutive quarters. If the overall GDP contracts and you can put that all down, down to oil, I do not think it's an issue that we should panic about. But the case in the first quarter was that it wasn't just the oil GDP that contracted. Some non-oil sectors, for example, manufacturing, construction, contracted as well. And the delay in the budget or the difficulty for manufacturing companies to procure forex could have accounted for the decline. So if flexibility removes such difficulty in the access to forex and manufacturing grows, in the second quarter, I believe that Nigeria could, although we are already in the second month of this, you are hoping that third quarter, you're hoping that in the third quarter things will be better.
Well, Dr. Teriba, let's hope for the best. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Well, I've been speaking with Dr. Ayodele Teriba, the Chief Executive Officer, Economic Associates. Well, a broad coalition representing private sector energy companies and civil society groups has issued a new report that spotlights a huge missed opportunity by the African Development Bank to achieve the bank's goal of universal energy access by 2025. Of the report's Decentralized Energy, the fast track to universal energy access, concludes that the current investments by multilateral development banks, including the AFDB, in big energy infrastructure projects actually hinder efforts to meet global goals for electrification. According to the report, the opportunity cost of delaying energy access can be remedied if multilateral development banks and infrastructure development agencies incorporate into their plans the full spectrum of energy options available today, including decentralized renewable energy systems. We'll take a quick break now. When we return, we'll look at what's happening at the debt market. Do stay with us.